Is Elon Musk demonstrating why we need to tax billionaires more? Is the rise of dragphobia a problem? And should we all get vaccinated in order to prevent car crashes? We tackle these questions and more on this episode of Good Take, Bad Take. Hey friends, welcome to this episode of Good Take, Bad Take. This, of course, is the show where we go through our social media feeds. We find really great takes and we like to highlight them and display maybe the reasoning behind why they're such a good take. And we also like to focus on some of the bad takes we see in our feeds and point out their inconsistencies or wrong assumptions they may have made. My name is Donald, and I'm here with my co-host, Britt. Before we get into the episode, just a reminder to like and comment and share. Always helps us out a ton, and we appreciate all the engagement. So, without further ado, we'll move into our first take, which comes from Jack. Is that Cocchiarella? Not quite sure on the pronunciation of that. Apologies to you, Jack. He tweets, Elon Musk is showing all of us why we should tax the hell out of billionaires. All caps for him saying that there. Well, you know, Twitter's stock was down while some other tech stocks have been up in the last week. Is he onto something here, Brett? Could this money be more effectively used by our government?
Yeah. Well, I thought this was a terrible take. And what was funny to me is that, Elon Musk is showing us why we should tax the heck out of all the billionaires. Elon Musk, I'm pretty sure, has the largest individual tax bill that has ever been levied against. I think it was like $11 billion or something like that from 2021. So all that to say, even if we agree with taxation and we grant the premise that we should be taxing billionaires, of all the billionaires out there, Elon Musk pays the most. So I don't know why, maybe Jack is saying Elon Musk is showing us that all the billionaires should live up to his example and let their money be taken from them. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying Elon Musk is so awful. So in order to keep his awfulness in check, we should rob him at threat of violence. So that's what's really funny. It's I don't know, man. It's that, if you look at what taxation is at face value, which is someone comes to you and because they were voted in by the majority, sometimes not even the majority, and they say, hey, you've got to give us 30% of your income because you've been productive, or else we're going to either haul you off into jail or shoot you. You'd be like, oh, okay, that's pretty personal and that's pretty violent and that's pretty oppressive. And so Jack is basically saying, well, I don't like what Elon's doing, so I want to sick the federal government on him. And, under threat of force or violence, he has to, I get to extort him, basically. It's such a bad, sad take.
Yeah, a bad, sad take. The no good, very bad, sad take.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't like this take either, quite obviously. There's so many things that the implication of taxation means. A lot of people try to say that taxation is just making people pay their fair share. Some people say taxation is a stop on bad behaviors like this. People are irresponsible. Maybe taxation is for the good of the poor and all these different reasonings. And I think when you actually look at how taxes are used and the incentive structure that's created or destroyed by them, it paints a very different picture from how people think about it or talk about it in the abstract. So, for instance, taxes stop people from being irresponsible. I don't know about that, because let's say that this tax that, they somehow levied a tax so great Elon Musk didn't purchase Twitter. Well, what's the reality in that case? One, the tax money that would have been used to purchase, or that got taken, that would have otherwise gone to purchase Twitter, goes to our federal government, who is currently passing, defense spending bills that will be used to bomb the Yemen people and go to other undeclared wars. Essentially, it will go towards waste. It will go towards pharmaceutical companies that they're buying out to force everyone to take their drugs. It goes to the lobbyists that everyone pretends to hate, and then they love to give the government more taxes, which goes to lobbyists to make them, enforce bad rules. So I don't think it gets used more responsibly, even if you don't like the behavior of the person. And then if you're talking about for the good of people, well, actually in the United States this year, I believe I read a stat that Christian giving alone from individuals of charity after paying taxes already, charity on top of that, paid by Christian families, outpaid what the government gave in charity as well. And I don't know what the measurements, they're using for that are. I don't know if that includes all social spending. I tend to think it probably couldn't account for everything because the massive waste that is in our social safety nets. But by some metric, there's at least a comparison point there to where the amount of charitable giving from a specific religious group on top of already paying taxes is so great. You at least have some level of comparison there. So it's frustrating because these kinds of takes, he's saying, one, I want to punish a bad behavior. That it's like, well, bad behaviors are going to exist, and who gets to define what a bad behavior really is outside of strict violence? Never mind the fact that you're paying the very legit, the quote unquote only legitimate user of violence. Two, it doesn't stop those bad behaviors. Two, it goes to an actor that demonstrably uses that money in nefarious ways. And three, even if you argue that the money can go towards helping people, we can already see that untaxed money would even more go to help people, because in the current system where people are being taxed, they already give in great generous amounts. So it's frustrating because on any of these angles that I feel people take when talking about taxation, there's just demonstrable evidence that it's not how they want to perceive it as.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about the like Christian charity and versus social programs and stuff. And we'll have to look up that study because I'm particularly interested in all the particulars of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've cited this stat on here before, but the worst of the worst charities, independent charities, private charities, they spend about 70% of every dollar that they receive on the actual cause they're trying to help, and then 30% on administrative and other costs that are not directly linked to it. So that's 70-30. Most really good charities are spending more like 95% of their money on the actual cause they're trying to help. When you look at the government, when you specifically look at like Social Security, right? Like the largest line item in the government, but federal government budget, as well as, I get obviously the largest charitable social program out there. It's reversed, right? So it's 30% of the dollars that Social Security collects go to the actual people, and then 70% of it actually goes to administrative costs and bureaucrats and all that stuff. So it's definitely not efficiently used money. It's actually destruction of wealth, or it's redistribution of wealth from the working class to the bureaucrats, which is pretty funny. The last point I want to make on this about, these folks that say like, oh, we need to tax, the richest of us, they need to pay their fair share. It's like, okay, you said something earlier about like just because they tax it, like it doesn't mean that the money is going to be used efficiently. And it's like, well, the best way to determine how the money is going to be, to make sure the money is used efficiently, is to let the people that have generated that money keep it and continue to generate money and value from that money. So it's kind of like, if you've got someone, back to the island of coconuts, right? Like, it's like, hey, like, this guy, he's like a really good climber. He can climb trees and get, he can generate 10 coconuts per hour or whatever. And that's more than he needs, obviously, to eat. And then he's reinvesting that coconut into himself so he gets a six pack and he's got really strong arms. And now he can climb 2 trees. It's like Jack, this guy that posted, it's like coming along and saying, that guy, he's generating too many coconuts. He should give away more coconuts and we should starve him so he can't climb 2 trees. It's like no one is better off because of that, right? Like there's no more value being generated. You're giving value, and instead of it being even given to people that need it, it's being given. It's like our coconut tax means that we actually have to let these coconuts sit out in the sun and rot. 80% of your coconuts need to sit out in the sun and rot. So everyone is more hungry. Everyone is starving. The billionaire that can climb many trees fast is no longer able to climb them, and society is worse off. So it's like, no, there is no demonstration. Rich people having wealth is a demonstration that they should continue to keep that wealth and continue to use it to reinvest. Of course, if they get it by ill-gotten gains, through fraud, through coercion, through leveraging, the federal government to, give them some sort of unjust advantage, then sure, there might be a case to be made for that. And the people that had their wealth taken from them, they should have that returned. But People that have generated wealth in a moral way should be able to keep it, and they are the best people to keep it to generate the best results.
Right. Well, and not only that, it's funny because the reason why they're saying, hey, that guy can't go collect more coconuts, he's collecting too many, is because that guy is maybe trying to plant a coconut tree in a location that isn't very fertile for growth. And he's investing a lot of time and resources into making that one coconut tree grow, and it's not working. And they're saying, look, this is why we need to stop him from collecting them more, because he's got too much time and coconuts to waste on this. Meanwhile, they're letting all their coconuts rot as well, which is just funny because I think that's, of course, the example he's saying here is because of Twitter and because of the quote unquote flop that it is right now.
We should do maybe a children's book or even a book for adults that's economic lessons in coconuts.
Yeah, I don't even like coconuts. Okay,
but it's okay.
And not my favorite. Okay, moving on to our next take here. We've got a series of tweets. The first comes from Mary Peltola, and then there are some replies, and we will be focusing on the last reply. So the first tweet from Mary reads, if someone working full-time at the minimum wage can't afford their basic needs, then there's a problem, and it's not the worker. And then a reply to that says, they need to acquire skills that fetch more than the minimum wage. Pretty good take there. And then a reply to that, which says, arguably, the problem with this outlook is that there will always be people who are stuck at low-end jobs. There are a finite number of better jobs that exist. Once they're filled, workers only have what's left. The pyramid has to have a base. What do you think? Does the pyramid base upend your entire worldview here, Brett?
No, this is a really bad take, and it makes me chuckle. It's like the line, there are a finite number of better jobs that exist. Yeah. Like, what a weird thing to say. It's not like jobs are like, I buy a bag of Skittles and there's only, however many, there's 100 Skittles in there and that's it. Once they're out, they're out. It's like, no, like, and this is very reminiscent of other posts that we've had that kind of fit into this socialist, communist worldview, that there's a fixed pie, right? The world is a fixed pie, and it can never be made larger, can only be made smaller, and there are people gobbling up too much of it. It's like, okay, well, how, if there are only a finite number of jobs, but we have more and more people, that means we're all screwed. It must be. But somehow the standard of living has increased exponentially in the past 100 years. Why is that? And it's like, it's because people and entrepreneurs create value, and they figure out how to, it's not about how many jobs there are. It's about, can I produce more than I consume? And if you can produce more than you consume, then you have a profit at the end of the day, and things get better for everyone around you. And so, yes, there's always going to be jobs where it's like a set path, where it's like, okay, you come here, you flip a burger, you put the fries in the frying thing, and then you put it all together and you serve it to the customer. And as long as you can do, 30 of those in an hour or whatever it is, it's like you're producing more than you're consuming, right? We'll pay you 25 hamburgers worth or whatever. There's always going to be jobs on the lower end of the spectrum because there are people that don't have enough skill to generate more value than what they are paid and whatnot. But that doesn't mean that like things aren't getting better, right? It's like, would you rather be a McDonald's worker today, or would you rather be a medieval peasant of, the 1400s? It's like, it's obvious what you would choose, right? Yes, there's a bigger discrepancy maybe in the wealth and all that stuff. But in all honesty, the standard of living, once you hit about $80,000 a year, doesn't increase much more beyond that. Sure, you might have a little bit higher end stuff, but in terms of the ability, and at least in the United States, to have food, water, electricity, plumbing, all this stuff, that doesn't really increase. It doesn't, increase or decrease much between everything. And yes, there's always going to be edge cases and things like that. But in general, everyone's doing really, really well. And if you're going to be poor, you want to be poor in America.
And the idea that there's the pyramid has to have a base, and there's always going to be these low level jobs, and the idea that people are always stuck in them is just Thomas Sowell points this out in his I think it's in Wealth Inequality is it Wealth Inequality in Politics? Is that the name of it? It might be. But he points out that people don't stay in the same rungs of jobs. The vast majority of people do not stay in the same rungs of jobs over their lifetime. And so while, yes, someone might be stuck in a low end job, the likelihood is they will not be in that job 10 years down the line. They will be in an upper rung of income. And then once you get to a certain age, you're in the top rung, and then you start slowing down and you lower down when you start retiring and things like that, due to experience, due to your abilities and things like that. And so the problem here, even if you're taking from the sympathetic viewpoint that, okay, well, there are going to be some people who don't move up. There are going to be some people who their whole lives are stuck in these jobs, either for inability to produce or lack of will to produce. And so what about those people? Just because, like, let's say someone just doesn't not even that they're mentally challenged, but they just don't have the mental capacity to produce more value, in the sense that that's not where their skill set is. Well, even if you take a lefty approach to this, someone who's more sympathetic and thinks that the only way you can solve is through government action, the implication of the original tweet is that the minimum wage ought to match a full-time living. But that's just not the reality of what you can do in that situation, because that's like saying, well, if someone can't produce enough stuff to sustain themselves, then we need to raise this artificial floor for everybody in order to help that one person. But raising the artificial floor for everybody, because you're not actually creating something out of nothing, does nothing to help that person. The better lefty approach is to say, we need more social programs for these people to help bail them out, because they're not able to produce more than they consume as a human. And so we need a government program to step in and supplement that extra. Because if you think about it in terms of numbers, it's like, this person is going to live X number of years. They're only going to make, they're going to make less money per year of life than they are consuming and what they need to live as a human. So we just need to subsidize that. Now, of course, I think that's also doesn't end up working. You disincentivize people from working with these social programs. The social programs, as we've talked about even just earlier, aren't efficient. They aren't able to spend, and voluntary charity is a way better option. But the point is that that's the vast minority. Even in those cases, that is the vast minority of people who are going to stay in lower rung jobs. Yeah. So yes, the pyramid needs to have a base in a sense, but that's also the sense of to say that everything needs to have a base when you get to efficiency. In order for a computer to work, you have to have the pyramid of cords running into a wall for electricity. You need to have components that work together in order to light up a screen. You need to have everything stacks on itself, including jobs in a society. But the difference is most people don't stay in the same rung. They move up, and better yet, they create their own jobs.
Yep.
Because it's not a set thing.
Yeah, they create their own jobs. They don't stay in the same rung, and at the same time, like, there is like a base economic unit, right, that has to be produced. But what's amazing about the free market and entrepreneurship and innovation is that the ability to produce base economic units has increased exponentially. And so, yes, like someone that's flipping burgers at McDonald's produces more economic units per hour than someone did, 400, 500 years ago. And they do it with less effort. And this line of thinking, right, like that we like let's follow it to its inevitable conclusion. So you're a burger flipper, which I think is what comes to mind when most people think about minimum wage. And it's like, should you be paid $12 when you only produce $10 worth of value per hour? And like what these people are saying is, yes, you should. It's like, well, how do you do that then, right? Because if $12 is not being produced, the extra $2 has got to come from somewhere. And so where they say is like, well, we need to subsidize that industry, or we need to force businesses, through taxation, or we need to allocate tax dollars to it. Well, the tax dollars don't exist because regardless, the value still hasn't been produced, right? Like you're still short $2. So that you fake print a bunch of money. And as you fake print a bunch more money, now savings are not worth as much. Now you get the situation with inflation that we're feeling right now. And everything that people, I remember at least in Seattle, we all said, hey, if you increase the minimum wage to $20, like we're going to have inflation, costs are going to rise. You might not feel it immediately. And it's funny is these people raised all these wages and stuff 60 years ago, whatever it was. And there was a moderate, in the short term increase. And everyone was like, oh, see, like everyone's willing to pay just a little bit more. It's going to be fine. And now it's like, now no one can afford housing. No one can afford to go out to eat. No one can afford. It's like really hard. I remember filling up a grocery cart at Safeway with just some basic groceries like rice, meat, some pasta, some like tomato sauce, and it was like $80, man. I was floored by how much it cost. And it's a result of the same type of thinking that drives the fact that we need to like raise the minimum wage, which is eventually you have to produce something. Eventually there has to be a profit. And if there's not, everyone is going to be worse off. And you're basically borrowing time, right? Like we live on borrowed time, borrowed capital. None of it is real. You have to produce stuff for there to be stuff in prosperity.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I mean, as you point out, I mean, that's what you put it in a better way than I did earlier. But just that raising of the floor means everything increases in price. You don't help the people out. So again, I think from this person's perspective, you can't say that the solution is a wage raise. You'd have to argue that it's a social program that subsidizes the imbalance of production and use. Again, I don't think that works out either. No. But regardless, I think this is a bad take, and it fundamentally misunderstands the economy and human action. Okay, this tweet is a Libs of TikTok tweet, which is quote retweeting GLAAD, GLAAD. And the GLAAD tweet reads, "Dragphobia is on the rise. There is a clear and present danger against our community and threats we really haven't seen at this level in over a decade, if ever." As a quote from Sarah Kate Ellis. And Libs of TikTok tweets, "Wanting to shield children from sexual adult entertainment whose stated goal is to encourage queerness is now called dragphobia. They can make up whatever terms they want and call us all kinds of names, but that doesn't change the fact that drag isn't appropriate for kids." What are your thoughts on this, Britt?
I'm assuming we're doing the Libs of TikTok tweet.
Yes, the Libs of TikTok tweet is the one we're doing.
Yeah, and it's a great tweet. Libs of TikTok, for those of you who aren't on Twitter or anything like that, it's a Twitter account that goes and just posts videos. That's all it does. Adds a little bit of commentary every now and then, but it posts videos of these drag shows that have people that are inappropriately clothed, dancing in front of children, or sometimes trying to get the children to participate. They even have some videos that they've showed where, these children have been brought on stage in some form of drag or inappropriate dress and then dance for adults with adults giving them money and things like that. So absolutely vile. Libs of TikTok has kind of come under a lot of heat. The gal got doxxed. Her family members have been threatened. I actually saw someone recently threatened to kidnap her and kill her and sell her into human trafficking and things like that. So they're pretty controversial, I guess if you could put it that way, Twitter account, which is really funny considering what they're just reposting what the side that's attacking this person is posting. And then they come out with this take, which is like, hey, like maybe you shouldn't have adult men who are dressed inappropriately dancing in front of children, and forcing children or encouraging children to participate with them. It's like, that is like the most basic line of decency you could say that we've had as a society that I thought we'd never cross. And people always joke about the slippery slope and stuff. It's like, we're not really in slippery slope. It's like free fall. It was just like, oop, now we're off the cliff. So yeah, I think this is a good take. I think it's indefensible to try and like criticize this take. And you just come off as a weird pedophile if you do. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was so annoyed by the term dragphobia. Yeah. Because the thing that's so funny about all this is, for so long, I mean, the typical conservative position has, and even libertarian position for so long has just been, sort of live and let live, I won't judge your lifestyle. Don't, just leave me alone. And frankly, that's how much of, I feel, the drag community in particular existed. I don't think I mean, like, I knew about drag and, growing up and stuff, but I didn't have a lot of exposure to it as a kid. And I'm grateful for that. And, it was sort of left alone. People who wanted to enjoy it could enjoy it, whatever. I don't think it's particularly healthy, but whatever. But now it's come to the point where
it's not like it's been in its own corner and all of a sudden people are saying, oh, drag is evil and wrong and gross. And it's come to the point where they're dancing in front of children and creating events at public spaces for children and trying to lure in children. They're going out of their way to draw in children. And now they're like, wow, why are people being so mean to us? It's dragphobia. No, it's because you started coming after the kids. You started putting yourself out and trying to actively, push your agenda on them and drag them into it, pun intended. And so it's just such a stupid thing. It's like, the kid who hits the bigger kid and then the bigger kid punches them in the face and they run away crying, I'm bullied. It's like, yeah, you provoked the big kid. What did you expect? It's dragphobia. No, it's called leave the kids out of it with your creepy sexual adult agenda.
What's so weird is and I don't like you. I was not exposed to drag, thankfully, as a kid. Never had any interest as an adult or anything until, they started showing it all over the place. And,
you do have an interest?
No, I don't have an interest, but okay. I've been exposed to it, I guess is what I mean. But that's kind of the point is the culture around it, at least from what I understand, is that drag is supposed to be this fringe edge thing. That's part of its appeal and all this stuff. And now they're almost gaslighting us and then saying no, this is completely normal, completely healthy. This is how it's always been. It's no, it's not always been that way. It's always been extreme. It's always been something that people on the edge of society participate in. And honestly, people were fine to live and let live with that stuff. But now that you're dragging into the square, it's if you drag out into the light of day and people don't like what they're seeing, which is what Libs of TikTok does, is they say, hey, look at what they're posting. These people posted it on the internet for everyone to see. They all get mad at them when it's don't be surprised when people get, it's so Orwellian, I guess you could say, even down to how they use language, right? I was going to say, we need to get better at making words up, drag phobia. I don't know, liberty phobia or something, because it's okay, part of drag's appeal to other people has been the fact that it has been normal society doesn't accept it. It's kind of like you're not punk if you top 40 hits, or things like that.
Right.
So it's just kind of weird, but they're literally trying to flip it and make it this has always been normal. This is always how it's been. And you should just accept it. Let us have your children. Did you ever watch that San Francisco Men's Choir?
I don't think so.
Oh man, I'll send it to you after. But it's literally, it's a choir of LGBTQ folks. It's the men's choir, but I think there's other folks in there too. And they're literally singing we're coming after your children, basically.
Right.
We'll convert your children, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
What's crazy about it is that a bunch of the folks in there came out because they all have their faces. It's the classic COVID Zoom choir thing. There's 4 or 5 guys in there that are convicted sex offenders against minors that are part of that choir. So it makes it even a little bit more freaky.
Yeah. Yeah, I a lot of maybe we talked about this in a cringe post. I think we did, because there was one of these kinds of takes earlier that we went. It was a very long one, but a lot of people also try to pull the example of things like drag's always been around. What was the example in that post? It was the movie Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh yeah.
Or and some other examples I've heard are things like in Mulan. If you've ever watched the Disney Mulan, they cross dress to sneak past a certain part as geisha dancers. And in those examples, for one, you're not pushing this in a queerness way. It's maybe not my favorite aspect of those movies regardless, but I didn't really care because it wasn't trying to lure in children to look at and see it this desirable lifestyle. That wasn't the point at all. The point in many of those cases was looking at this absurd behavior. Exactly. Yeah. It was a humor thing. So absolutely bizarre and weird point to be calling, it's a phobia now. I think that's stupid and silly. Okay, moving to our next take here. We've got a headline that reads, people who skipped their COVID vaccine are at higher risk of traffic accidents, according to a new study. Well, gosh, I wish we would have known that. That would have changed everything.
Would have changed my mind. Yet I haven't been in an accident yet.
Yeah.
So some context on this. I found this. Someone actually sent it to me. One of my friends. And I was like, man, we're doomed because I'm like very unvaccinated, you know,
very.
Very. Like I didn't even get the original one. But this study came out. Basically, they took 11 million people. 16% of them were not vaccinated. 84% of them were. And then they compared over like a 2-year period how many got in car accidents and stuff. And it turned out like 25% of the accidents were from unvaccinated people. So they're like, oh, it's like a 72% increase, you know, relative risk increase and stuff. And that's their higher risk and all this stuff. It's just like, man, like there's so many reasons that could be, right? Like, and this is, and what they were arguing for in the article is that insurance companies should raise rates on people who are not vaccinated because they're at higher risk of traffic accidents and stuff like that. It's like, man, you got to be so careful about those type of recommendations because I read the study. There was no like hypothesizing about why this could be if correlation does not equal causation, you know, and like, I think about a thing I could do right now. I could say, hey, people that are vaccinated have lower levels of vitamin D and organic produce, you know, in their body because they're more likely to be hypochondriacs. They're more likely to stay inside, more likely to live in a city where there's not a lot of sunlight, where they spend a lot of time indoors and such. It's like, okay, well, like that, sure, that's one way to look at it, but there's a lot of reasons why they might not have low vitamin D, and I can't really draw a conclusion or draw a policy action or something or recommendation for society off of that. So this is just like such a bad take to me because it's so reaching, right? And it's like it's clear because it's so reaching, the agenda of it, which is we hate unvaccinated people. It's like it's revealed, right?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I to your point, whenever you have a statistic, you can justify it after the fact very easily without any data. You can conjure up a reason why the stats say what they say, and you can conjure up reasons for contradicting stats. So, you know, for instance, you could say, well, the reason why people who skipped COVID vaccine are at higher risk of traffic accidents is because they are more willing to be risky. They went out more during, you know, 2020 and 2021. They're generally less risk averse and they're more independent, and so that they drive in a way that reflects that. You could also have like come up with it from the complete opposite angle. If the data had shown that people who were, you know, unvaccinated were less likely to get into traffic accidents, well, you could say, oh, well, that's probably because people who were unvaccinated, a lot of them either you know, they're nerdy, they like to stay at home, they read up on a lot of data or argued back and forth, or maybe they were low intelligence and they didn't have access to vehicles, and so they're more likely to take public transit. There's a million ways you can think and justify these things. And so to say, oh, the reason why there's this correlation is because people skipped or you know, the correlation of people who skipping vaccines means that they're more at risk. That's a totally absurd, inane, and bizarre requirement for an insurance company who's insuring your car behaviors to do. Now, if you can draw a link that shows that that's the case, that's fine. But let's also play that game, because then we should probably start weaponizing other insurance companies towards people who did get COVID vaccinations, because guess what? People who got COVID vaccines are more likely to be at health risk because they got a COVID vaccine. People who are young and healthy and less likely to get diseased or suffer from some kind of complication were more likely to skip out on the vaccine because they were not at risk. So therefore, maybe, you know, if you got the COVID vaccine, you should have higher insurance rates for your health. You know, like, how do we want to weaponize these things? It's kind of a tend toward the fascistic model of using private companies and private actors to achieve government aims, which is to get people, punish them essentially for not being vaccinated.
Well, that's what they did, right? At the beginning of 2021, when the vaccine rolled out, Joe Biden came into office and he tried to use the OSHA mandate to force private companies. He's like, well, I'm not forcing you. It's just if you don't do it, I'm going to fine you $14,000 per week that you don't do it. That you, for every employee that you don't have in compliance, it's like, okay, there it is, right? It's government holds the gun to the head of the business owner and says, you better get your folks vaccinated with this vaccine that that the companies have no liability on, or else I'm going to basically run you into the ground. So yeah, all these different types of things, and to be clear, in the article, at least they wrote, they hypothesized the same thing that you did, that people that skip their COVID vaccines are probably more freedom minded and have less regard for the rules of the road, and view government regulations as tyranny, and so they're not going to respect it. And so that's a marking trait, someone that we should have higher, riskier behavior and all this stuff. So it's like all of this. It's like, man, you just hate liberty. You hate people being able to make their own decisions. You hate the ability of people to choose what they do or do not put in their body. And best, Aaron Prater or whatever her name is. Like, you should make the decision and choose, who gets to live and who gets to die and who gets to have money and who doesn't. It's like, man, none of us like that. When you strip it all down from, the nice font and the nice website and the flowery language, it's like you're literally just saying, like, I think I should be able to inject you with this needle, or else pay higher premium. It's like,
yeah, a needle that's been paid off by Big Pharma, by the way.
Yeah,
this hated entity, right? We all hate Big Pharma, unless they're paying our bills, I guess.
Until we can use them to force our ideology on other people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I I don't know. I think that it's funny because this is also coming out of the people who were claiming that they wanted COVID amnesty. They're like, stop pointing fingers. Let's stop dividing. We need
no
to
one
come
could have
to
done
a
it right.
Yeah, and no one could have known that kind of thing. So we need to forgive everyone. And then any little shot they can get, they're like, but by the way, you guys are more likely to get into car accidents. it's like the really, sleazy guy who starts a fight, and then, when the other guy defends himself and like the higher authority steps in, they're like, oh, okay, well, we were both wrong. But frankly, I mean, he broke the vase, but we didn't, it's like, no, one, you were in the wrong, and two, you're trying to call this truce, and yet you're still trying to throw bombs subtly. Just stupid behavior. Yeah, I hope these people get ostracized completely from society, frankly. Okay, this one's a little bit of an interesting take, so I'm curious on your perspective. So we have Senator Bernie Sanders, who tweets, I voted tonight against the $858 billion Pentagon budget, which is 10% more than last year. At a time when we spend more than the next 11 nations combined on defense, we should invest in healthcare, jobs, housing, and education, not more weapons of destruction. So what do you think? What do you think about this take?
You chose a difficult one, man.
I did. Yeah.
I was thinking about it. I've been thinking about this whole time because I knew we were going to get to it. I think it's a good take. With an asterisk, maybe. But it's like, I guess the asterisk to me is like, if I accept the premise that we have a government, that taxation is the price we pay to live in this society, then yeah, this is a great take. Instead of us spending money on the Pentagon and, when they can't even balance their own budget or account for the money that they have spent in the year, let's give it to, the reasons I would want to pay taxes, let's give it to that. Let's actually help the people around us, actually help children get educated, all that stuff. And yeah, no more weapons of destruction. We have far too many. We could defend our shores with what we've got right now. We do not need the, whatever it is, 130 military bases around the globe that we have right now. We do not need to be supporting that. So I obviously don't agree with Bernie Sanders on basically anything. I mean, he's kind of anti-war, but I don't know if you saw earlier this week, he introduced the War Resolutions Act to stop the war in Yemen and other places, and then he totally caved like a weakling and a coward. So I don't know. Maybe he doesn't actually. Maybe he actually would love to fund the Pentagon, but it's like, well, in my base, I need to pretend that I'm principled, and I know that the bill's going to pass anyway, so I get to vote no on this, right? As so many senators and Congress people do, is like they've got their like, oh, this is the one I can vote no on, even though I know it's going to pass, and I can throw some red meat to my base. But it's a good take regardless, right? If you blurt out Senator Bernie Sanders' name, I think it's good to say, I'm not going to vote for the Pentagon. I'm not going to vote for more spending. I just think that the people that choose where the spending should go should be private actors.
Yes. Yeah. So I was gonna say when I was thinking about this, I went way back and forth because there's that context right around the fact that he voted or he rescinded his call for a vote on the resolution that would have withdrawn our troops from Yemen. And so going into that, I'm like, this is so disingenuous. And then of course you obviously have the fact that he's, specifically calling to use the money to spend on government spending for things that the government shouldn't spend money on.
Yeah.
And so there's, back and forth and back and forth. But ultimately, I think I've come to the same, you know, uh, area as you on this, which is to say, no, just because I don't like the context of him bailing on the Yemen thing, and just because I don't like where he wants to put that money, that taxation, doesn't mean the take is overall bad. I think the take is more right than wrong. I think it's better to say that if you have a government, it should not be spent on things like, this Pentagon budget, which is going to completely inflate spending. It's going to completely inflate our ability to bomb overseas. Now, if we could tweak it, we would obviously get rid of that latter half and say, we don't need to invest in healthcare, jobs, housing, and education as a government. Those things need to be invested on by private actors who will actually be able to do good stuff about it. If the government tries to take a hold of this, it will end up in a bad spot, and you'll end up. I mean, that's kind of the ironic thing between, what you and I think about both conservatives and liberals, which is the fact that conservatives are really good about pointing out the wasteful spending of the government when it comes to the social programs and their inability to succeed. But then they're like, yeah, let's have an $858 billion Pentagon budget. That's great.
Yeah.
And then Bernie is like, oh, I'm so much better on all that kind of stuff. Let's not fund this 858 billion Pentagon budget, and we're gonna instead create all these other areas where we're going to spend a ton of government money. Like, it's just a kind of silly thing to come to. So,
well, I guess like kind of get into the weeds a bit on this. It's like you can't have the healthcare, jobs, housing, and education spending from the government without the military in a way, because we have to, in some way or form or fashion, prop up the petrodollar in order that we can keep printing money through our Federal Reserve to fund these programs. And so that is kind of like, I guess I'm processing this take in real time right now, but it's like, you can't really have one without the other, man. So by you saying you want to have healthcare, jobs, housing, and education paid for by the government, you're also saying that you do have to have you do quote unquote have to have these military bases and the threat of force that anyone, if you threaten to get off the US dollar, to not use the petrodollar as your currency, we're going to Gaddafi you, and you're going to be paraded through the streets and get murdered. Not saying that Gaddafi's a good guy or anything like that, but it's just, I don't know. It's Bernie Sanders is not a principled person. Like, he wants to portray himself as someone who's like principled and like the bird landed on my podium and like I love nature and I'm all good, and it's like principled people don't make the arguments that he made about Joe Biden, saying that Joe Biden's, a crook, a phony, someone who has special interests in mind, and me, Bernie Sanders, I am not that person. I'm a man of the people. And then when you lose, but he got cheated. But when you lose, I guess he lost. He got cheated from Hillary Clinton. But regardless, when you lose, turn around and endorse that crook, that phony. It's like, man, Bernie Sanders, he is. All that you need to say about his career is that he is all about like, we need to tax the millionaires and the billionaires. And then once he became a millionaire, it was just the billionaires. And then when people started questioning about his wealth, he said, well, if you want to become a millionaire, just write a really good book. It's like, okay, we've all been saying that to you. You must become a capitalist now, because that's a capitalist argument. You want to become a millionaire, create a great product.
Well, I was gonna say, just to correct you, he got cheated in 2020 as well. Don't make any mistake.
I can't recall the details of that.
Maybe in less numeric ways and more in collusion ways, but I don't think it was a coincidence that Pete Buttigieg and everyone, and Amy Klobuchar and whomever, there was a third person, all dropped out at the same time while Elizabeth Warren stayed in right before that very critical primary.
Oh yeah, I remember that now.
There was coordination, let's just say. And of course, Elizabeth Warren came out saying he said a woman could never be president, which even as much as I think Bernie Sanders is a hack, I don't think he said that. I think that was
imagine like Biden being the feminist pick. Like, okay, Liz Warren.
I know. Well, it's okay. We've got Kamala there to be the feminist.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
She's a hero. But yeah, no, I think that's also kind of one of my bigger complaints about Rand Paul was he spoke out against Trump in many ways and then ultimately endorsed him. And I see the idea that you want to have some level of influence in a quote unquote friendly government of some type, but I think at a certain point you end up watering yourself down too much, and I think that's what happens here with Bernie not calling the Yemen wars resolution. I think as there were a couple of moments like that for Rand as well, where I think he voted in dumb ways on some things, but for the most part, I think he actually stayed pretty good on things, which was even against Donald Trump's will. And of course, you have people like Thomas Massey who did that, where I think he probably endorsed Trump, but he was the one who of course called for the vote in person for the most massive spending package in history. And Trump, of course, flew off the handle about it and called him all kinds of names, but Massey stayed true to himself. So that's great. Bernie couldn't handle the ire of a sleepy old man who probably is wearing diapers and needs them changed multiple times a day. Like that's the level of principle you have. You're not willing to stand up to that in order to end a war in Yemen. So all that being said, this take in a vacuum, probably better than not, fundamentally flawed, and coming from a very flawed individual who probably doesn't mean it as much as we wish he did.
But if we could implement it, snap our fingers, $858 billion away from the Pentagon, we would do it. So absolutely. I think it's good in that way.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely right. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. We appreciate it. Make sure again to like and share, comment, all of that good stuff. It helps us out a ton, and we will catch you on the next one. Take care.